Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video we're going to talk about something called the least cost rule. So when firms think about selling their product, one thing they always have to keep in mind are their costs. They want to keep their costs down so that the revenues they generate far outpace those costs and they can make greater profit. Well, there's something called the least cost rule that can help firms understand how much of two different resources they should purchase to keep their costs down and make sure they can maximize profit. So the least cost rule says that to minimize cost, a firm should employ quantities of two resources, we're going to call them X and Y here, such that the ratios of each resource's marginal product to its price are equal. Now that's a mouthful of words, but we can express it with a formula here. So the marginal product of X divided by the price of X should be equal to the marginal product of Y divided by the price of Y. And this should look a little familiar to you because remember back when we did utility way back in Unit 1, we said there's something called the utility maximization rule, where the margin utility divided by the price of each two goods should be equal, and that's how you maximize utility. Well, it's the same thing here, except instead of maximizing utility, we're trying to minimize cost. We're trying to get the biggest bang for our buck every time we buy a resource. And so we're trying to figure out, instead of, how much of two different goods to buy to maximize satisfaction, we're trying to figure out how much of two different resources should we buy to minimize costs. That's the idea of the least cost rule, right? And just like with the utility maximization rule, let's say that we do these formulas and it spits out 20 and 30, right? So 20 units per dollar, 30 units per dollar of the resources, whatever those resources are. What would this tell us? This would tell us we should buy more of resource Y and less of resource X. Why? Because resource Y is giving me more marginal product per dollar than resource X. So you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. So always buy more of what gives you more marginal product per dollar, and always buy less of the resource that gives you less marginal product per dollar. Now, just like with utility questions, with the least cost rule, we can also do this with a table, right? And so what we have here is a table of quantities of two goods, robots and workers. So we have quantities 1, 2, 3, 4. I've given you the marginal product of both robots and workers for those quantities. And I've also told you the rent, or the cost of a robot, is $10. And the cost of a worker, how much we have to pay them, is $5 per worker. And so the question is, if let's say this firm has $35 to spend, how many robots and how many workers should it employ to minimize cost? So in other words, how do we apply the least cost rule with this table? Well, the first thing we need to do is get the marginal product per dollar for robots. And so according to our formula that we figured out here, what we need to do is take the marginal product divided by the price, in this case $10. So 30 divided by 10 would be 3. 20 divided by 10 would be 2, and then 1, and then a half of a unit per dollar, whatever the units may be. And then for workers, we divide by 5, so it's going to be 4, 3, 2, and 1. The next thing we need to do is look to see where the marginal product per dollars for both goods, both resources, I'm used to saying this with utility, for both resources are equal. Because remember, that's the rule, right? That's the least cost rule. We need to look to see where those ratios we just calculated are equal. And this happens at three different spots, right? We have the 3s, and then we have the 2s, and then we have the 1s. And so the question is, well, which of those combinations is going to get us to $35. That's where I have to go back and look at the quantities and see how much am I going to spend. So for the threes, I'm going to get one. Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll do this in black just to be safe. I'm going to do one robot because that goes with the 3 for robots. And then I'm going to buy 2 of the workers, right? Because, or hire 2 workers is probably a better way of saying that. So we've got 1 robot and 2 workers. Okay, so 1 robot cost me $10, and 2 workers also cost me $10. So in total, that combination would cost me $20. Now, is that the least cost minimizing combination? Well, it could be if the other 2 go above $35, but what if one gets us even closer, gets us more bang for our buck? So we got to keep going. Well, let's look at 2 and 2. So for the 2s, in that case, I'm getting 2 robots, right? Because you can see that that 2 goes with that number right there, right? And then I'm getting 3 workers because the 2 is in the 3 quantity row. So just so you can see how that would work there. So 2 robots, 3 workers. My 2 robots would still cost me, actually in this case, they would cost me $20 because I have 2 instead of 1. And then I've got 3 workers. Those cost me $15. 20 plus 15, $35. There we go. So the combination would be 2 robots and 3 workers. Now, if you wanted to just double check your work, you could do it for the ones, and you would see that would be 3 robots for $30 plus 4 workers for $20. 30 and 20 be 50, and that would be spending more than your budget, right? So this combination of 2 robots and 3 workers is the least cost combination. It minimizes my costs, therefore maximizing my profits, and that's how many of each of these 2 resources this firm should employ, which is really useful, right? Because you can make sure you are hiring what's going to get you the most bang for your buck in terms of resources. So I would encourage you to practice with this, try different numbers, make up your own tables, and that might help you just practice that as well. The other thing I will remind you of, again, is when they give you answers for the 2 ratios, you always want to buy more of the resource that gives you more MP per dollar and buy less of the resource that gives you less MP per dollar. Works the same way as it did with utility. So that's all for this video on the least cost rule. Until next time, have a great day.